In this video, we will summarize part 2 of Be Here Now, a cookbook for a sacred life. Here the author uses the tried and tested layout of a cookbook to bring more practicality to spirituality, allowing the reader to readily apply the concepts from the first part of the book, as well as answer common questions that arise when following the spiritual path. If you're interested in the first part of the book, please see the links below for part 1, which contains a review of the book and a summary of the first part of the book. This manual contains many topics and questions that I believe most people on the spiritual journey would ask, with many practical examples. I believe this makes it useful. My only problem with it was some of his beliefs are quite far out. So in this cookbook, there is a multitude of different topics that are discussed. I will only discuss a few of them, but here is a list of all the topics, and you can see if any of these interest you, then I would suggest getting the book for yourself so you can look into them. So now let's move on to the different concepts in this book. Firstly, the introduction. So where does one begin the spiritual path? The author suggests that you begin just where you are. Remember that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one single step. And what will happen is that your sadhana or spiritual work will begin with certain boundaries. For instance, it can be a meditation every morning, but then eventually it should become part of everything you do. Next, let's look at the topic of renunciation. So this does not mean some big act like a New Year's resolution or leaving one's family to live as a monk. It can be much more subtle than this. On the spiritual journey, it refers to non-attachment. This involves breaking the link between you and your desires. Your desires will always be there, but the renunciate does not think he is his desires. Once he realizes that his desires are creating his veil of illusion and suffering, then they will naturally fall away, and more subtle forms of desires will arise, which too have to be given up, and eventually all that will remain is his desire for bliss. This too must be given up. Next, let's look at Tapasya, also known as austerities, and these are completely stopping those desires which dominate you. For instance, if you really love food, then a good idea is to regularly fast for a whole day to break the hold this desire has on you. And related to this topic is eating, which he also talks about in the book. Here he suggests to stop placing so much importance on the varieties and subtleties of taste, as this is another form of attachment. But this does not mean giving up all spices and all tastes. It just means only using what is necessary to remain healthy. Next, he talks about studies, and what he suggests is following those who are on the path themselves and are seeking truth. And some examples he gives of books that are like this are texts such as the Bhagavad Gita, the Tao Te Ching, the Bible, etc. And what he suggests is to take one passage and read and reread it. Let your thoughts work around it and how it would affect your life, what laws of nature it is reflecting, and then sit quietly for 10 to 20 minutes to reflect on it. He also talks about asanas, which many people know about from yoga, and here he says we should not perform it as is the custom here in the West, as a type of exercise, but to focus the mind and body. Next, he talks about mantras. So mantras are designed to work by removing all thoughts and keep the focus on a single thought. If you imagine your mind like a large lake and each thought or sense as a small ripple disturbing the lake, with all these disturbances, it is impossible to see down into the depths of the lake or the depths of yourself. The mantra acts as a single source of disturbance in the lakes, drowning out all other disturbances and creating a single point from which the waves come. Once this is achieved, then we can seek to eventually release this thought as well and become completely still. And there are various mantras for everyday activities, such as showering, eating, etc. And then there are also further mantras for specific goals, like opening chakras or becoming more compassionate. You can decide which mantra is suitable for you and then start trying to work with it. Next heading I want to look at is called Dropout Cop-Out. And this is talking about dropping out from society. And yeah, it is not an external dropout of society, but more an internal one. As you perform all the same activities, but what changes is your attachment to these activities. So one drops out of one's identification with the illusion of separateness from everyone else. And as the Buddha said, as long as you think there is a doer, you're still caught in the wheel of birth and death. But we must also remember that as long as we have a body, we have to do things. Even if you sit in your bed all day, that is doing something. What he meant was not to identify with the actions and be more focused on being throughout your daily activities. The next heading I would like to talk about is Karma Yoga. This is the act of using stuff that makes up your daily life as a vehicle for coming into union with the divine. And to do this, you need to add a third component to every act. Normally, there is an action and a person performing the action. For example, there is you, and there is you watching this video. Now we need to add a third person in your mind who observes every action you perform throughout the day without any judgments. And through this process, that is how one becomes more conscious and thus comes closer to union with the divine. And next I'll talk about meditation. So the author talks quite a bit about meditation, but his main focus is that one should try to use meditation to make the mind one-pointed and bring cessation to the turnings of the mind and the various thoughts of the mind. And then the final topic is book recommendations. So at the end of the book, the author provides a multitude of different books for further reading to help one along the spiritual path. And I thought this is very useful because often what happens when you finish one spiritual book is that you might not be sure where to look next for similar content. And this helps you to find similar content related to what this author talks about. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in future videos.